Welcome everyone to James Bond Club Ireland, and it's great to have you here again. We have a full complement this time, a full team. Sean is back in the house after his absence last time because he was moonlighting somewhere else in a more interesting podcast, apparently. Is that right, Sean? Is that right? Yeah, that's what you think.
I wouldn't put it like that, Paul, but yeah.
Well, welcome back, Sean. We still love you.
Thank you very much.
We got Kev, of course, and Andy.
Hello.
And joining us today is the wonderful Thomas Felix Creighton. Is that right, Creighton? Is that the
Creighton?
Right? Creighton. All right, that's the way to
join
pronounce it. Finally, I got it. Well, welcome. Thomas is, many of you may know him already from his online presence, Fleming Never Dies, and also your podcast, which is Albion Never Dies. Is that correct?
That's correct. Thank you.
No, not at all. I mean, I've been delving into it sort of bits and bobs over the years, and it's only after I met you that I started to take a little bit more focus on it, because it's really interesting, because you are really exploring a lot of British culture, and focusing really specifically on the enduring appeal of Bond and Ian Fleming, and often doing it, it has to be said, while dressed superbly. Your attention to dress is just... I have seen you in the Skyfall outfit. I've seen you in an ivory dinner jacket. I've seen you in a safari jacket in Hong Kong, which doubled from Macau, I believe, in Man with the Golden Gun, and the velour tracksuit as well from A View to a Kill. I mean, your lifestyle game is bang on, sir.
Thank you very, very much. And whilst recording this, I'm wearing, for the sake of James Bond Ireland, I'm wearing my Aaron sweater. So.
Beautiful. That is very
on
nice.
brand.
Well, we need to up our game. Last time Joe Darlington was on here, and because he was on, he was like, "I've got a pint of Guinness," and we're like, "I'm not wearing anything Irish or drinking anything Irish." We need to get more Irish on this. But anyway, before we get into it, right, let's just do a quick catch up on what we've been doing since we spoke last. Guys, what have you been doing Bond-wise over the past 2 weeks since we were last on the air? Sean, you go first, maybe.
Obviously catching up on the 30th anniversary of GoldenEye once again. Brilliant. Actually watched it again.
You've caught up on that on 360 times so far, haven't you? Or however many days.
And now a month and a half to go, so I'm not doing too bad so far. But yeah, it's been brilliant. Obviously, we got to see it on the big screen there recently. Seen it at the start of the year in the big screen in Navan. It's been brilliant, and also just loving the fact that La La Land Records have another vinyl CD or vinyl collection coming out in terms of Moonraker. So things have been very good in the Bond world, and long may it last. That's
fantastic. Kev, what have you been up to? You've been in hospital.
I had a little break. I had an overdose of Thunderball, and needed to go in and get checked up, just in case I had high levels of disco volante.
You got the bends from surfacing too soon.
I did.
Your Thunderball dive. Yeah. You're okay now?
I'm all good, ready to watch it again for the 600th time on the 60th anniversary year. That's how it is. No stopping me. Bond-wise, though, I'm doing. You might see it on the Bond and Color there over Christmas. I'm looking into the audition process, the audition role process when they were doing Her Majesty's Secret Service. Because I found a few pictures of other actors doing their audition for that particular movie.
Yes.
I'm trying to say a good colorizing, but finding out a bit more about it, because it's something new for me. So that's what my Bondy thing is. But I'm nothing to show for it yet.
Do you have the Charles Helfenstein book? This one, by the way, autographed by George.
No, I believe you're going to send me that copy in a minute.
It's just terrible here. You'd be But this one, you caught me on the hop now, so I haven't checked it out. But this one has lots of pictures of like the deleted scenes from St. Paul's Cathedral.
Well,
It's got lots of. I need to be careful because I rub off the signatures if my sweaty paws get onto it too much. But
we'll need to talk about that, because when we were in London, Sean and Andy and me were down in St. Paul's Cathedral, and we were mapping out all the spots where he jumped off with a ladder and jumps off the roof, and then we mapped over where buildings have changed and where we said, oh, that was where he jumped there and stood there, and we Andy, it's fair to say
Thomas is reaching into that. He's got a reference for this, I'm sure.
There we go now. Look at this. This is going to be good.
It's getting out the London Bond map
yes.
just to work out. Has Pete included this? Is it going to be in a second edition?
Brilliant, yeah.
Look at that. The target is
London.
It's a great map. It's a great map.
Love it.
But yeah, we were going through all that, and we were saying, "Oh, this is," and we were finding windows that we could see in some of the old black and white photos, and there's still a lot of it there. In fairness, despite all the development over the last,
even drain pipes are still there, weren't they?
The drain pipe, yes, you spotted the drain pipe, didn't you?
Shamefully, I stayed in a hotel spitting distance from St. Paul's, and when I went to, if I'd said to Monica, "Hey, do you want me to go take a look at a drain pipe up there?" I don't think I would have really. I was already, squeezing the Bond lemon hard enough that weekend. But just to go back, look, there's some stuff on the audition process in here, so I'll
have a look at that.
This is a great book, I think.
Right. Yes, that's what I'm getting stuck into now. Anyway.
So, Andy, what have you been up to?
Well, I watched a bit of GoldenEye as well, but it wasn't the Brosnan GoldenEye. I watched the 1989 Charles Dance film about Ian Fleming. So that I just stumbled across that on one of the channels on Sky the other day, so I watched that.
Nice.
And believe it or not, I also watched The Living Daylights.
Yeah,
Nice.
Andy is a reluctant Dalton fan, Thomas. So that's why we have to.
I'm a big
fan. We have to warm him in and say, "Welcome to the Dalton world, Andy."
Yeah, I was flicking through Amazon and just do roll it and then roll down, roll left, and what came up, and it was that. So I thought, do you know what? I'll watch it.
It's brilliant.
And it's as bad as I remember.
It's brilliant.
Boo!
I didn't get that. Where is it up on my list? Oh no, it hasn't. Shit. Okay.
No, it's brilliant.
No, it was all right. They're all, even the bad ones are quite good. But no,
there's no bad ones. There are only ones you like more than others.
Exactly. So a GoldenEye that's not GoldenEye and a Bond that's not Bond. That's been my 2 weeks of it, really.
Well, I got so excited with this and the release of Moonraker that I spent a few quid on some new speakers for the living room, just to give it that little extra special oomph. They're not arriving till next month because they had to be ordered. They didn't have the ones I wanted, so they had to order them. So I'm like, so yeah, I'm kind of going down the soundtrack route of Bond at the moment because they're just so fantastic. To hear the ones you haven't heard before that La La Land's are releasing some of these tracks, I'm like, wait a minute, and so that's exciting. And I think maybe we should talk about doing a music episode somewhere down the line. But before we forget that we have a guest on, let's turn to Thomas. Thomas, welcome again. And I just want to give, before I let you introduce yourself, I just want to give people some background. You have lived in China for 6 years, I believe.
That's right.
You speak Turkish, you know Istanbul and Hong Kong very well. You are kind of a sort of a Bondian figure yourself a little bit. In that sense, yeah, exactly.
Scrub up.
You're quite the Brosnan era fan. I know that as well. And you have interviewed a lot of Bond insiders, especially those with to do with From Russia with Love and Skyfall, and obviously the Turkish side as well. So we want to hear a lot about that. But let's turn it over to you, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to blast you with our quick fire round.
Certainly, thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Thomas Felix Creighton. I run the Albion Never Dies podcast, which looks at British culture. James Bond is a great Trojan horse for British culture generally. Like people, even though they're made internationally, they're kind of really American produced, definitely American financed, and yet they seem to be like the poster for all kinds of aspects of Britishness. So that's what the podcast is really all about.
That's fantastic. That's very interesting, and I'm going to come back to some of the terminology used as well because I find it quite amusing. But I think one of the things I'd love to touch on is the Irish culture and British culture, and why so many cultures have just put their arms around James Bond, and what a good kind of ambassador he is for Britain generally. But we'll talk to that. We'll talk to that in a few minutes. Right now, some of our members may know you, some may not. So what we want to do is do a quick fire round to get a little bit of just who you are, what your thoughts on Bond are, and stuff like that. So we're going to split this between us. I'm going to kick it off. Andy, Thomas, please. Thomas, give me what is your favorite Bond film right now. And I say right now because, given the fact that we, like good parents, we never have any favorite children. Like great Bond fans, you can't have a favorite Bond film for too long because it'll get edged out by another one next week. Then you may go back to another one. So let's talk about what your favorite Bond film is at the moment.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's why I love the Bond films. There's one for every mood. And the mood I'm in at the moment is Tomorrow Never Dies. It remains one of my favorites. It's probably my favorite modern Bond film, meaning post-1990. And I'd watch that. I think it's almost a classic Bond film, a model for many others.
Love it.
Quite a coincidence. I just put that on yesterday. That's fantastic. Yeah. Okay, good one. Tomorrow Never Dies. I must admit, I was a reluctant Tomorrow Never Dies fan until I spoke to two people who were real Tomorrow Never Dies fan, and they elucidated to me that my criticisms of it were quite unfounded. And I had a rewatch of it, and I thought, actually, you know what? It's so much better than I remember it. And some of the things that I thought had kind of they've maybe grown in my mind as criticisms were like they're not that bad. Like, for example, Jonathan Pryce's slightly cartoonish villain, we've seen that before. We didn't dislike it in the 70s. Why do we dislike it in the 90s,
I really like it.
I was able to really enjoy it.
When he's over the top, it's normally when he's got an audience in front of him. Like he really performs in front of people. When you see him like sitting alone by himself, it's a very, very subtle performance. So I feel
that's very true.
Almost uniquely, his theatrical manner makes a lot of sense for the character in that moment.
Yeah. And for anyone who thought that character was unrealistic, then we went into the 2020s and then suddenly the world is full of characters like that. So, who knows? Okay, second on the quick fire round for me is, obviously, you've done a lot of traveling and you've done a lot of Bond location traveling. If you were to recommend just one, gun to your head, just one, which would it be?
The first one that came into my mind was Hong Kong, and especially the Peninsula Hotel. I went, not to say often, but I went many, many times and enjoyed that afternoon tea. And I think the one thing the man with the golden gun slightly misses, we see Bond walking into that hotel. We don't see the entrance hall, which is magnificent. And that's where the afternoon tea is held and relatively accessible. And Hong Kong is a great city to visit.
That's one I've never been to. Did you please tell me you drove a green Rolls Royce up to one?
Well, that's there to pick you up from the airport and is pretty pricey, but I can confirm, all the Rolls Royces I've ever seen in Hong Kong, they've all been for the Peninsula Hotel. Right.
So you drove in an inverted tin can behind one then.
Well, I came over the border from mainland China, so that's every time I visited, I was coming in from the mainland. So that's very different.
Fantastic. Okay, Andy, your turn. Go ahead.
Right. So moving on for the next question for you. So which is your preference? Is it Connery's Istanbul, as in from Russia with Love, or is it Craig's Istanbul from Skyfall Chase?
Oh, so I think when Connery walks around, you actually get a sense of the city. You get the feel of it. You can see it. You also meet Turkish characters. So I think it goes into the culture of Turkey much, much more than any others, which also gets into Fleming's experience of Istanbul. For Daniel Craig's, I mean, you see it, but originally it was supposed to be India, and Turkey was almost the fallback from that. So you don't get a lot of the culture embedded within it. It's a bit like The World Is Not Enough. You get Istanbul very, very briefly, and that's important for the geostrategic position, but they couldn't get Brosnan to the country at the time for security reasons, and we don't have any Turkish characters. It seems that Istanbul is populated by Russians, so we seem to get like a diminishing amount of Turkishness every time we visit Istanbul. So for me, it has to be Connery's Istanbul, and rarely riding on the back of Fleming's Istanbul.
I love that, because because even when you hear the language being used in the scenes, when it's either him or Russians trying to speak the language, like it feels. I mean, it felt exotic then, but it still somehow feels exotic now when you're watching that.
Yeah, and one of my favorite things as someone who speaks the language is that when it's a Turk speaking Turkish, it's correct. When we have the Russian girl speaking Turkish, she does make mistakes. And the policeman has been quite patient with her when she asks for directions. So we have that a few times. A non-Turkish character doesn't speak Turkish perfectly, but the Turks obviously do.
Quick one. This is something that I'm sorry, Andy, to interrupt. Just on the back of that question, though, in the gypsy camp, when they speak, is that the same kind of Turkish, or is there a dialect in there, or is there a notable difference at all?
Definitely a dialect, but I have to say I haven't seen this film in quite a long time. I last went to the cinema more than a year ago. And
I'm not here to test you. It's just
As a Bond fan, I don't watch them too often.
Andy, back to you.
I don't like to get too familiar with them.
That's it. Keep them at an arm's length.
Exactly.
Yeah, to keep them special.
Yeah.
Because I've certainly had it with films where I love them and I watch them to death. I just could never watch them again. I don't want to do that with the Bond films. I can certainly flick through the books anytime, but the films, it tends to be a bit of an event.
Yeah.
So, quickly, next question then. You're a well-travelled man, travelled great distances. Which Bond theme song would you play first on a long-haul flight?
Oh, probably an all-time high if it's on a flight.
That's nice.
Brilliant.
That's an underloved song as well, that one. So hooray for that one. Nice to see that. Great. Those were great, Andy. Well, Sean, you have some questions?
Yes. The next question up, Tom, is what's your most underrated non-Brosnan Bond moment?
Oh, non-Brosnan moment.
Yeah.
Well, Bond tends to be appreciated. Oh, you know what? I'll say it's the slide whistle from the Man of the Golden Gun. I think it's overhated, underrated. I'm like, it's never grated with me, for one thing. I'm always like, it's an action scene that's halfway through the film. Bond's not about to die, right? If you have a bit of silliness in the climax, which a couple of them do, for me, that actually takes it down, because the climax is where you start to take it seriously. You need to have the cathartic moment of Bond killing the villain. It needs to be straight for me. But halfway through the film, I think to have a comedy chase of some kind, play into the comedy, have fun with it.
It's a really good observation, actually. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, I have to say that the whistle bit's never bothered me either. It just seems part of the film. Well, it is.
It is. And it definitely takes, well, I know a lot of people. Oh, look.
Do it.
Can you do it? Hey!
I've got my the Man of the Golden Gun branded slide whistle.
Brilliant.
This is why you come to James Bond Club Ireland, folks. We bring this kind of quality. You get reenactments of the film.
Very good. Very good. He's right. Well, next question then, Tom, is what Bond suit would you happily wear yourself? So, any of the films, what one would you pick that maybe you haven't worn before?
Okay, well, so quite honestly, the way I got into the Bond community was through Matt Spazer's website, bondsuits.com, because I was going to tailors. I'd already been to tailors for a few times to have suits made, but I always found it difficult to articulate what I wanted. Like, I just wanted a normal suit, like fairly plain, done well. But everyone's normal is something really, really different. So it was really good to go through his website and start showing pictures. But I work with a tailor. Her name is Ada. I lived in Shenzhen, which is just opposite Hong Kong. And that's where she's based. She goes between the two. She's a Cantonese tailor, and she has her own style. So quite a few times I've shown her a suit. For example, the check suit in No Time to Die. She saw that, was like, I'm going to do that in my own style. And I like that. I like her style. She knows what I like. So that check suit, I mean, I've worn that. That's one of my most worn suits.
Oh, brilliant.
And
Fantastic.
yeah, so I think I've been wearing that, almost wearing it out for a year before the film came out. So yeah.
And how did you meet her at the time? Is it
Yeah.
or does she have your measurements and you can still order from her or something?
Yeah, so because I got to know her very, very well over like 6 years, she got to know me very well, and then we keep in touch long distance. She did send me a suit. This is one of the few that she hasn't met me in person for, and I'm slightly startled because she knows my weight better than I do. Like she can just see in a photo.
It's confirming.
Over 6 years, my dimensions changed a bit, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, really nice. I think that's something I want to do, is get a tailor-made suit. And you attended the Timothy Everest talk in London, which I was lucky enough to go to as well a few weeks back. And I made the point to him while we were there that he seemed to make the idea of tailoring and having something made for you much more kind of accessible than I think, some people, definitely me, I would not have thought of getting myself something made bespoke or made to measure. I was like, that's for other people. But actually he made it sound like you don't have to be like, in an upper class, or you don't have to be uber wealthy. You just have to put a bit of money and time aside and make something really well and feel great in it. And he just made it feel like, yeah, that seems like a really logical, good thing to do for yourself, So it was very nice. It changed my mindset a little bit. So something I will do at one stage before.
I really liked. He gave a talk on how when he first starts to tailor somebody, he first just wants to know them, right? Because everyone starts a little bit different, what their influences are, and that definitely describes the relationship with my tailor Ada and myself. That we just got to know each other really, really well, because we are all different, and I think it's fine that your clothes should express your personality. So I like to do
100%.
Bond inspired rather than Bond kind of copied clothes for the most part.
Very good. Right, Kev.
I'm going to get into a little bit of the culture. So this is a very straightforward question, and it's what I ask everyone when they come to the house as well. So is it tea, coffee, or a Vesper, Thomas?
I'd always have coffee. Yeah, black coffee. Yeah. So I started drinking coffee when I was a kid in Turkish Cyprus, and of course Turkish coffee is black. You don't add milk. In the books, of course, Bond has it plain, and in the film they changed that to sweet. In Turkish culture, generally, plain is like what a man should have. And it's a point that Kerim Bey has nothing to prove, so he can have it as sweet as he likes. And so it's that little power dynamic in the book. So I feel that gets lost in the film, but I also feel a film can't have footnotes. It just has to be right first time, whether you know the culture or not.
I love
those.
Still,
now we know. We've got some detail there we didn't have before.
I've often been at home and my wife has been there in pouring tea, and she's trying to do kind of almost like she's in Turkey, kind of raising the spout further higher up for this aspect, and it's kind of it doesn't work for Barry's tea, by the way, if anyone's curious about trying that. But coffee.
Yeah, I wonder as well.
Whilst you've asked the question, I must say we served Vespers at my wedding, so I am keen on Vespers.
Good. We do like a Vesper here.
Kev, does your grandmother get sloshed on Vespers when you come around and ask her that question?
I cannot possibly answer that question.
Yeah, there you go.
We're having tea. But we're not going to try.
As far as the neighbor's concerned, it's tea.
It's tea in a glass,
strong tea,
brown paper bag around the front of it. Thomas, one thing, and I think we kind of see this when we see Fleming Never Dies and Albion Never Dies in the podcast, but I'm always kind of fascinated because you cover such a wide range of things as well. So what part of Bond's lifestyle appeals most to you? Is it travel, clothes, cars, or something else?
Yeah, I think the travel, I noticed the clothes are like rarely popular generally. The travel I find interesting. If I'm reading Fleming, I always notice the food. And so I'm a fan of Edward Biddulph's book, License to Cook, and he's got a blog. So I think, 5 years ago, I was making loads and loads of those recipes. I've now settled down to my favorites. And as it's A View to a Kill's 40th anniversary, I've been doing a lot of quiches lately.
Yeah.
It's one of the few bits of food to get into the films. And I couldn't resist the cocktails like for a bit. But I've settled on what I like now, and that's that.
Okay. I think we know.
Yeah.
We know a bit more now, Paul.
We do. I mean, those are great questions, because I remember looking at your site, first of all, your Instagram account, going, is this guy a lifestyle guy? Is he a travel guy? And I was like, he's kind of everything, you know. It was quite good. This is sort of a Lawrence of Arabia meets James Bond kind of hybrid. I was like, oh, this guy's cool. So you've touched on some of this already, but we want to move on a little bit into a little bit more depth into your travels, your background, because you're in a unique position to have lived in China and Turkey. You have, I remember chatting to you about this in London. I could have spent the afternoon talking to you. And your parents have an interesting background. Your whole background around, how what they did and traveling in the 70s. Your time in China and Turkey. Can you talk us through a little bit of that briefly, and maybe what you see in Bond and how it's reflected, and whether it's accurate or not, and that kind of stuff?
Sure. So
sorry for the extremely broad question.
I guess the short version. So my father was a military brat, right? So his father was in the army, and his father, and his father, and his father, and his father. So Dad was born in Kuala Lumpur and lived in all the lively spots. Cyprus when that kicked off,
Wow.
Aden when that kicked off, Egypt when that was getting interesting. So that was his childhood. And I once asked him, so why did you join the army? And he just said, well, nothing else occurred to me ever. Like every man he knew growing up had been in the army. So I think the point you mentioned in the 70s is that he was sent as a British Army officer to Kuwait to train the Kuwait army. So he speaks Arabic, and my mother traveled extensively with him. So they both spoke Arabic, although he spoke Bedu Arabic to speak to the soldiers, whereas my mother spoke more Lebanese Arabic. So they had noticeably different accents when they spoke it. I went out to the Middle East relatively soon after university. I went straight into education. I was teaching English to the most conservative Islamic clerics in Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
A very interesting job. So these are the guys who train the religious police, which at that time was significantly more powerful than they are today. But I did get to travel around Saudi Arabia, including seeing some of the railways that had been attacked by Lawrence of Arabia. So I got to read Lawrence of Arabia while seeing it all around me.
Wow.
And I also worked down in Oman, which is one of the most naturally beautiful places I've ever been to.
Gee, did you ever start thinking about maybe writing a novel or anything like based on these experiences?
Well, my parents always say life is copy, take notes. So I've got extensive notes about all of this, and I've been going through some family documents as well. So I've got cinefilm from my parents, slides, and also writing that they did in Kuwait. Again, Kuwait in the 70s is totally different from how it is now. I have been.
Yeah.
God, that would be a very contrasting travel log, wouldn't it? Your experience compared to their experience in the same places.
Absolutely, 100%. So these places are, I say, vastly different. And my grandfather had been a child in Hong Kong as well, mostly in India, but also Hong Kong. So I found it really interesting to go to Hong Kong. First of all, see a few of the things that he remembered. There's a clock tower at the harbour he described to me when I was a child. So it was interesting to go and see that. By this point, I was pretty interested in Fleming. So I was also traveling around where Fleming had been in Hong Kong. It's not in the Bond books, but it's in his book Thrilling Cities, where he follows one of the author that he really likes, who wrote The World of Susie Wong. And he talks about how different those areas are when he's going. So I found that really, really interesting to see the change of these districts over time through some very, very successful writers.
That's fantastic. And through the eyes of, let's say, James Bond, right? Bond seems to, certainly in the films anyway, he seems to swan through locations. He dresses the same. He is always himself. But he always, or he quite often will dip into the culture of the place he's in. So, whether it's the coffee in Istanbul or the mojitos in Cuba or whatever it is he's doing. How did you feel?
The beautiful girls.
Oh, the beautiful girls, yeah. Now, they probably didn't find too many beautiful girls on display while teaching the religious clerics, but
there is
how did you find going through these different cultures, different countries, different people, being quintessentially British yourself, you know, is there a comparison to be made with Bond? Is that just silly, or does that in the back of your mind, or what's it really like?
I mean, it is interesting to experience, and you have to be true to yourself, right? I mean, they don't expect you to, especially in Saudi, they expect you to be what you are. So there's no sense changing too much. It is interesting, like in Fleming's novels, he talks really about the food. So yeah, I've been sat cross-legged with how can I put it, on the floor in front of me, you've got the piles of rice. It's called kabsa, and then goat that's being cooked all among that. So that kind of meal is really interesting. And then going off to China, where every locality has its own unique cuisine. So we tend to use the kind of umbrella term Chinese food in the West quite commonly, which is a bit like saying European food. You know, do you mean Norwegian or Italian or what? Right. So China has very strong regional identity when it comes to food.
Yeah.
So
and they don't eat lemon chicken, do they? With MSG on it.
You'll have some interesting flavors out there, but very, very different one place to another.
I can imagine.
Moving, it's like changing it slightly. You see, you've lived in or been in Hong Kong a lot and Istanbul a lot. We touched on it a little bit earlier that Brosnan's Bond went to both of those, but he never filmed there. Yeah. Did that take away from some of for somebody who knows the area really well? Does that take away some of the authenticity of being in those places?
To an extent. I think the biggest thing that takes it away is that you don't have the local characters so much. You don't have a Turk. And one of my favorite things in the really old Bond films is something that Fleming throughout his life often gravitated towards older men or more experienced men. And it's something clear in most biographies, especially growing up without a father, his father having been killed. He often gravitated to father figures, and Bond in the books kind of does the same thing, or certainly puts a lot of value in local experts. And I remember listening to a modern screenwriter. It wasn't Purvis Wade, but it was somebody who worked on the Bond scripts. And he said that he didn't like it when it was just kind of two middle-aged men talking to each other. And I'm like, no, that's what I really find interesting, when Bond puts value on another man's words. I find that really interesting, like the Diamond Expert and Diamonds Forever.
Yes.
I find hugely interesting. And for me, that adds in a huge amount. So it's not so much filming it there, it's having something of that culture in the film.
I never thought of it in terms of seeking out the father figure. That's really interesting.
This is why one of my favorite allies is in the Daniel Craig films. We have Mathis, because in Casino Royale, it's like Mathis is dressing sometimes in the suit when Craig isn't. And you're like, oh, you can kind of see how Bond might start to dress like him later on. I feel they didn't lean into it as perhaps they could have done. But you can kind of see it. He is the older, respected spy.
And he does offer those pearls of wisdom. Yeah. Thanks for being my mentor. Boom. That's harsh. And yeah, we spoke about your Turkish as well, and so you saw it in From Russia with Love, and you haven't watched it in a while, but I mean it is quite exciting, I would say, to be able to speak the language and see it represented in a Bond film. I mean, that's quite fun.
Yeah. Right? Oh, absolutely. Like Naomi Harris speaks one word of Turkish in Skyfall. She shouts "get down" when she opens fire. I just love to imagine her at some kind of SIS training school. She's learning all the useful words like "there's a bomb" or "get down" or whatever.
There's a great still from that scene. You mentioned that there are very few Turkish characters in Skyfall, but there's a great still from that scene where she's just shouting "get down." She's got the gun, and there's a Turkish woman, or certainly someone who is acting as a Turkish woman, looking at her like what the hell are you doing? You're really ruining my day.
I think in an old Bond film, you'd have a close-up of her doing a double take or something.
Yes, or perhaps a pigeon doing it. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, that's true. So now, in terms of the Shanghai and Macau sequences in Skyfall, now they, especially the Shanghai sequence, I know some of it was actually filmed in London, and some of it is obviously very, very stylized. But were you able to see anything there that reflected your experience as well in those films?
Yeah, so Shanghai, I visited. It doesn't have quite the number of skyscrapers it has in the film because they actually photoshopped in a few more. But actually, where I lived in Shenzhen, it does. And not only that, career highlight, I opened the most expensive per square foot language center in East Asia, and so I was working there getting it set up. It was in the financial district of Shenzhen. So on all sides, 360, you're surrounded by these skyscrapers, which had those animations. So it had the jellyfish going up at
Wow.
night, and it was,
Class.
you sometimes have to face away from it because it's so distracting.
Yeah.
But you do have phenomenal skyscrapers. Shenzhen has one that's much taller than anything in Europe. My flat was quite small, being only on the 24th floor. But it was something at Chinese New
Lovely.
Year to look down on the fireworks rather than up.
Oh my God! Wow. See, that's a different perspective completely. Yeah.
So, how do you think Chinese audiences perceive Bond? And obviously he's a British icon. Do they see him as an outdated spy and a bit of a relic, or just pure entertainment?
It's a good question, right? So Bond was not released in China until roughly the Brosnan era, right? And there's
Wow.
unofficial showings and so on. So it doesn't have that historic there's no Chinese dad's favorite, right? So a lot of Bond fans get it because their dads liked it. That's just not the case in China. It's a modern thing that's come in. So first of all, it's Western cinema. China has its own cinema. Aside from Chinese cinema generally, where I lived, you've got Cantonese TV, which is a different ecosystem itself. So it is an exotic foreign thing. As such, I mean, one Chinese person asked me, isn't that just the same thing as Batman? Because for them, it just looked the same. They've got all the gadgets, they're both foreign, and they're both rich. So for them, it seemed absolutely identical. Also, if you use the Chinese search engine Baidu and search Ling Ling Chi or 007, you get like Mission Impossible films. Like it's a generic term for spies generally. So I've had
Wow.
Chinese people genuinely not know whether it is British, American, French, whatever. It's generically Western. Obviously, once you start to narrow down, if a Chinese person is really, really interested, then they would. But it would be very much on the modern Bond and not so much the classics.
Because I think it's more Indian film industry where they've almost basically remade Bond films frame for frame, but with Indian actors. So that's not happening in China then.
No, and they've got their own they've got their own perspectives. There are Chinese spy films which have nodded to that, but that's more the Cantonese influence, therefore through Hong Kong. On the mainland, The Monkey King is the classic, which is an adaptation of Journey to the West, kind of. It's a kid's thing.
It says it all whenever they relate to Brosnan. Like the whole world will relate to Brosnan, so it says it all, to be honest with you.
But it literally is a different world then, isn't it? That there's what happens here and what happens there, and almost never the twain meet.
Yeah.
Well, we are seeing a resurgence. I would say we are seeing an influx of more and more Asian culture. Not maybe so much Chinese, maybe as Korean, Japanese, and some others. Bollywood. I mean, the idea of Bollywood, I can totally understand it. To me, all the Bollywood films look generic as well. But I bet there was people going, no, there's this genre and there's that star and there's this stuff. So it's just because we're not used to it that we probably see them the same way. But I think it's fascinating that we're getting more and more influence from Asia generally. Some amazing children's films and TV. I know that from what my kids have been looking at. Obviously, there is K-pop, which they have not discovered yet, thankfully, because I know some of their peers have, and it's like some sort of crack cocaine. But it's interesting, and it'll be hopefully we'll start to embrace some of that, and hopefully they will start to embrace Bond and Mission Impossible and other things as well.
Just on the point of culture seeming samey from a distance, right? So one time I was in the car with my parents and I was allowed to choose the music. So I put on some of my Turkish music and it played for quite a while. It got to a track I really liked. I said, this track I really, really like. And my dad was like, oh, were these all different songs? Well, from his perspective, it's all exactly the same.
Oh, that's dangerous territory, isn't it? It's like you all look alike, you people. It's like, no, come on, try harder,
I think the same when he plays the Kinks.
All those Kinks songs sound the same. Yeah, I mean, look, it's kind of fascinating, and it's an opportunity to delve into some stuff and just get more stuff. I mean, the films and TV coming out of South Korea, for example, are so exciting. I hope this just, I hope we get more sort of Asian versions of 007 or something cool like that,
I think Die Another Day was way ahead.
Yeah, exactly. I hope we have more opportunities to see. Well, let's not. We're all in the Die Another Day love camp here, so we don't need to have any bloodbath. But look, this is great. Let's move on a little bit and talk about your a little bit more about your particular cultural identity that you're exploring through Albion Never Dies and British identity. I'm amused by your focus on the word Albion, because it's obviously an older term for Britain. But of course, and I promise I am not trying to reopen the massive wounds between Ireland and Britain, but what we are familiar with is obviously the term perfidious Albion, which I'm certain you've heard of as well, which is kind of the negative association for those impacted by Britain. I mean, it would go, like, for an example, it would be like the Lienz Cossacks, who Britain handed back to us, and the Irish rebels. And I only say this because it's interesting, actually. Back in the 1600s or something, they used it because they signed the Treaty of Limerick, and I'm from Limerick, which was to allow, after the Williamite War there between, I can't remember exactly, but King James, supporter of King James and so forth, and seeking religious freedom and so forth, and all that kind of stuff. So then the British reneged on the deal, and so, or at least in part, and which enraged the rebels in the further battles and stuff like that. So it's one of those terms that doesn't come unloaded, right? And and what I was interested in is, you are rightly proud of your country and of its history, and you delve into it in a very, very interesting way. And I was wondering, like, when you go to these places, do you get positive reactions? Do you get negative reactions? Do you get mixed, nuanced, thoughtful reactions to what you're doing and to what you represent?
So every country I've been to, I've generally had very positive reactions about Britain, however that's defined. And I've often been the first British person somebody's met. So it's curiosity.
Wow.
So what intrigues me is that, England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland are relatively small places, but everyone in the world has heard of them, even if they've never met somebody from these places. So I find that interesting, and I get really curious. So why have they heard of it? What they often have a really fixed idea. People have sometimes described me as extremely English, and I'm like, but I'm the only English person you've met. So how can you say I'm extremely English? Where does this fixed idea come from? And you mentioned at the beginning of the show, I'm wearing an Aaron sweater, and Joe Darlington, when he was on, referred to drinking his Guinness, which the rest of you aren't. But I'm like, but where aren't outsiders coming in? So obviously we get a focus on that. When people look at British culture from outside, they naturally have a different perspective. For me, I'm obviously an insider because I'm British, but I'm also an outsider. I spent most of my adult life outside the UK. So you get that interesting mix. So that's what I find interesting, those different perspectives on it.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. And I've forgotten really that you have the outsider perspective in your own country to some extent, which must be quite an interesting challenge to deal with, I would imagine.
Every time I come back to the UK, because it should have that feeling of coming home, but you spend a sufficient amount of time abroad. And I knew this, I've been told this as a child, because enough of my family had done it. You spend your life traveling to foreign countries, and you come back and you find your own country is foreign now. So I always have to come with that mindset. It will be different.
Are you not based in England now?
I am now based in England. Yeah, I have been based here now for a couple of years. So I'm trying to deal with that new reality that I'm just an English person in England now.
One of the things also that's great about James Bond, and it is genuinely great, is the fact that he is an ambassador for Britain abroad, and he seems to transcend any just cultural differences. Well, at least where he is known. Let's say he hasn't penetrated Chinese cultural awareness so much yet, but in other countries he has. And like, for example, in Ireland, we've loved Bond for many years, and I think the same is true in America and other places. And especially, like, maybe in Fleming's time, there was the special relationship between the UK and America, which might have been represented through, like, Bond and Felix. Would you agree with that? Do you think it's as strong now as it was then, or how do you feel? Britain is seen through the lens of Bond?
Yeah, I mean, there has been the argument in the academic world that the less powerful England becomes, the more powerful it becomes in the Bond films, right? So when Britain's got a relatively big empire still, then he leans on Felix quite a lot, and you get that kind of equal partnership. Felix disappears from the films for a bit when Britain's not confident, and then when Britain starts to be more on the stage, then you start to get Felix a bit more. So it has this weird inverse relationship of Felix. I love
I
the fact
never
the film.
noticed that trajectory before. That's fascinating.
It also flip-flops, right? So the British identity in the Bond films flip-flops from being kind of pretty serious to being pretty
Yeah.
hokey, Union Jack parachutes and all that kind of thing. But it does flip-flop backs and forwards. So in Skyfall, I mean, his British identity is really serious. It's never played for a joke. But in some films, it really is, I hesitate to say, almost Austin Powersy, the way he flies the flag. But again, that does follow the trends and the fashion in Britain.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it also, I think when I started to meet more British people, I had a built-in assumption that they had a sort of humorous sense of self-awareness because of Roger Moore skiing off a mountain with a parachute. So maybe it has something to do with that as well. He lends you a certain currency in that regard. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, and he's also kind of, it's a strangely all-embracing identity, right? So we can have Brosnan as the Irish Bond. Timothy Dalton gets referred to as the Welsh Bond, and I'm like, he has a Derbyshire accent. I mean, I'm doubtful of this, but we have.
I'm going to Bratislava, right? Check it. That's a terrible Welsh accent, but something like that.
I don't know what country you're coming from there, Paul. Sorry.
No.
I tried,
bitches. Embracing.
You tried.
I mean, you asked me before about why I use Albion, which is obviously a loaded term, but obviously I want to talk about kind of British culture. But any term I use, if I use British, there's certain loaded connotations. If I use England, I don't think England Never Dies is the podcast I want to host. I think I might be a crowd.
Yeah, exactly. You might get unusual Twitter following.
Yeah, and even the UK Never Dies. Like there's a lot of oddities that can come up because they're political identities, right? Albion was basically people from the continent looking over them like there's a bunch of islands over there. We'll call them Albion, right? It's a very loose term.
Yeah, and I must admit, when I met you first, I was keen to extract what sort of angle you were coming from, and when I realized that you were just super in a very intelligent way interested in the culture and interested in history and stuff like that, I was like, this is immediately fantastic. This is really, really interesting. It's something to explore. Because the banging back and forth, especially with Ireland, like it's interesting to see Ireland's relationship with Bond as well. And even when we know that the most recent incarnation of M had spent some time at the hands of the IRA in Britain as well. That's an interesting character background to give him. But it doesn't make anyone less. I mean, actually, we should. We're not going to go into this because this is not a political identity. But Sean O'Hare has an interesting take on this because you live right on the border, where I guess opinions might have been maybe stronger back in the day. And you've met a few people who've questioned your Bond fandom.
Oh
really,
No, it's like you're sort of. It's at the end of the day, we can all love it as a film. Like it's not real life, but it's more something you get into. And you're probably questioned years ago, why would you be liking that? Why are you watching them films and all the connotations? But
because
things have changed now, massively changed. So it's completely different now, So
it's funny where you are in the country as well, because where I am down in the south, I think there's again it's sort of the rebel county. And yet I can people are watching royal weddings. We've got UK channels here that, they're getting on, they're putting on their menu tops, getting on the plane, heading over to watch a match of the weekend or Chelsea or whoever you're going to see. There's such it's amazing how interconnected. Maybe it isn't amazing. I mean, it's something that's been around for a long time, whether we in Ireland or those in Ireland liked it or not. But there's such a connection that we kind of get, so we kind of see the things you'll be talking about on the podcast, and I go, I understand that, I get that. It's an interesting perspective to get it, especially from someone who's been away. And I really did kind of chime when you said I'm getting used to being an Englishman back in England, because you are, when you're abroad and away, people kind of react to, and I know as an Irishman, I've been away, and the best St. Patrick's days I've ever had have been out of the country. It's amazing, because of just that difference. So it does chime in, just that there's definitely that overlap, which is fascinating. We kind of embrace it, and then we kind of push it away, but it's there.
Yeah, I mean, England and Ireland, we have to live with each other,
we do.
We sure do.
I'm sure you'll be delighted to know my parents' second date, they talk about Ireland. I've got
Really?
records from them both and talked about it, because both of them had very close Irish ancestry. So they're both talking about some of the conflicts, because both their families had been on different sides of the discussions around 1915. So they talked about this on their second date, which, to be honest, I'm quite impressed by.
That is. Yeah. I mean, it's actually very Irish, they talk about politics, religion, or sex, and you're talking about all three of them, that kind of thing.
So my mother, obviously, she was born in England, but she went to a Catholic convent. So she once told me, there was an English girl in my school. Of course there was an English girl in your school. You were in England at the time. But, however.
So we can claim you then, Thomas. Can we? If you've got a bit of ancestry there, can we claim you as one of our own here?
All my family branches go back to Ireland, yes.
Oh, well.
See, but at a distance, I've never been.
No, we're claiming most of British cultural icons, right? We're claiming the Beatles, obviously, Oasis, obviously. Even Connery's granddad was from Wexford, So we're gonna get everyone eventually. But I actually, to be serious for a moment, a lot of the nice things when I met some of the Bond alumni, like Vic Armstrong, people like that, like they immediately open up and they want to talk to you about your places that they've been, places that they've worked with, people they know from your area, and stuff like that. So, in one sense, Bond is more than just cultural connective tissue. Like, he's actual connective tissue when you actually start talking to these people and you realize, how much work they've done locally, how much, obviously we have Kevin McClory, which is, obviously he's a little bit of he's the Blofeld in the outfit, but it's just fascinating to be able to see how the film industry, in particular in the British Isles, as it were, there's a lot of back and forth between the two of them, and that's been very, very fascinating for us. We've talked about Joanna Harwood, who's Irish, and we've talked about so many others as well. So we love it, and our long-term goal is to lobby Amazon MGM Studios to make a film in Ireland. So if you're listening, which I'm sure you are, Amazon and MGM, come over here. We'll get you. We'll do a location scouting tour with you. Now, listen, I just want to move on to the next segment because I'm conscious of time. Yes, it was, and if you go out to the island there, it's quite. It has a religious. There were a lot. First, there were pagans there, and then there were, like, in the old days, there were a lot of there were monasteries there where, like, monks were out there to literally fight devils that they saw coming. So when you go on a tour there, you have to go out on a boat, and you can easily distinguish the Star Wars fans from the religiously devoted, who are, and they're all both out there. And then there's me somewhere in the middle going out to see you all the time. But we wanted to take you on one more section, and Sean, you're going to lead this. Sean, you're going to get an option now, Thomas, of which of these slippery slopes you'd like to slide down. So, Sean, go ahead.
There is no option. Sorry.
It's Brosnan all the
way. We put Brosnan in this.
So, Thomas, quick. Well, we're going to look at a few different areas, but look, which would you enjoy to chat about the most? So we can look at From Russia with Love. We can talk about Skyfall, the pre-title sequence, or we can look at A Touch of Brosnan. And look, we'll go whatever one you want. So you take the lead.
Always happy with A Touch of Brosnan. That's
sure. Why not?
Well, tell me this podcast. However, it is a good one.
Yeah. And here, quick shout out to your 200th episode, where I loved your support and love for Day Another Day. It was a great listen, and well done. Fair play to you. Anyway, right, Brosnan, Hong Kong or Istanbul. We're looking at the irony in terms of maybe the media and the power themes. And tell me, maybe Tomorrow Never Dies, The World Is Not Enough. What do you think of your views on them in terms of maybe like the power themes, or Hong Kong, Istanbul in terms of irony, things like that? What's your views on that?
So for Tomorrow Never Dies, the best Bond films are like 5 minutes in the future, they say, and I think Tomorrow Never Dies, if it suffered from something, it was 20 years in the future, right? That film has only become more and more and more relevant as it talks about the danger of the media. Obviously, we have China as a great power, which we see it as a great power today. And it's not always to our benefit, but it's not against us either. They're in favor of themselves and their own economy and their own interests, which in many ways is fair enough. So are we. So I think seeing that dynamic between Brosnan and Michelle Yeoh, I think is one of the best dynamics in the films. I think they'd meet as equals. And he's also not perfect at everything. It's one of the few times where he sees, like, he's asked to send a message and it's a Chinese keyboard and he can't do it. Right. So it's one of the very few
Even
times
though he had a first in Oriental Studies.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting one, right? What language does Bond speak changes from one incarnation to the other, right? So Roger Moore obviously spoke Spanish, Italian, because Roger Moore was good at Italian. Connery's Bond speaks the first in Oriental language because he wanted to. He needs to for, You Only Live Twice. But that's not, the literary Bond doesn't. He struggles enormously. He doesn't know Oriental languages. And Brosnan speaks Russian because that's the thing of the age. So I find it really interesting how they
German.
flip different.
Mein Büro had an Auto reserviert.
And he seems to know the AI voice lady, which
that's right.
Oh, nice touch. And then in terms of the world is not enough, once again, different dynamic, Istanbul sort of used as where everyone meets the pipeline. Any thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, so it's really interesting that film talks about, building a pipeline past the terrorists, right? They're never named who these terrorists are, but it's described as a dangerous part of the world. And it was. The PKK was ramping up its campaign because their leader, the terrorist leader, had been captured by the Turks whilst the film was being made. And that's why Brosnan couldn't go to Istanbul, because he was about to stand trial. And the PKK threatened basically to target foreigners in the country to get international appeal. So Brosnan is a pretty high-profile foreigner, so that's why he could not go. But you can go around, like, there's really distinctive camera shots, like, over Istanbul, which can only be, for example, from the Galata Tower. So you can go up the Galata Tower, look down, you have the exact same shot they have in the film. I've done it, you replicate it shot for shot. So it's great for that. It also made Maiden's Tower much more of a tourist destination. So when they made it, it really wasn't. But it just made it far more, interesting, high profile. So you can go, you can have the most expensive and the worst Turkish coffee you'll ever have, but it is a great place to go and just see the sea traffic go past.
Nice.
Amazing.
I feel like I'm there already.
Yep.
Back to me. Well, I think we just have a few closing ones at this point. So let's see. If you could personally guide James Bond through one city that you know well, thereby basically embodying the mentor role, although you're not old enough to be a real mentor. But if you're a travel mentor for James Bond,
right.
How would you do it? Which city would you take him through, and where would you take him to in that city?
Genuinely, I might do it through Istanbul again, because I feel he needs to hit that city and hit it properly. He hasn't done it since the 60s. And there's bits that he hasn't seen. So it is kind of funny that, Sean Connery's Bond and Daniel Craig's Bond both go through kind of the same bit. But there's so much more. Obviously, it's got Europe, it's got Asia. What we see is kind of the South European side as opposed to the North, which is the more Republican kind of 1920s area, which is where Fleming stayed. So Ian Fleming stayed at the Pera Palace Hotel. In the book From Russia with Love, Bond stays at the Crystal Palace because of the joke of the name. And the Crystal Palace is everything that's opposite of the Pera Palace. Right, so there's no hot water. Pera Palace was the first with constant running hot water, all kinds of things. But it is genuinely a luxury hotel. I think any Bond fan would be well served going there and just having afternoon coffee there.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, that's where I'd take him.
Amazing. I didn't know that. That's really good. Can I ask every time I hear Sean Connery and he goes Tuscadurum, is that correct pronunciation? And
no, he's getting it wrong. Teshikula is how he should say it. But he makes it Teshikula.
Teshikula.
Yeah. So he's making little mistakes that an Englishman might make. The Russian lady's making little mistakes a Russian might make, and then Karen Bear is saying it right in his son's. Yeah, I'm racking my
quite
brain.
authentic then.
Yeah. So that's what always impresses me when I watch it. That
Very
linguistically it's on point. Yeah,
that's brilliant.
and you do have the minorities in Istanbul that it describes there. Whether the girls have wrestling matches over men, I can't. say for sure.
They have those in Park where Kev comes from, so that's.
There's one happening outside the window right now.
That's just Saturday night, though. That's
And last question: shaken or stirred, or dealer's choice?
Oh, shaken. Yeah. I want my
go.
cold drink fast. Yeah.
There you go. Excellent.
Brilliant.
All right. Listen, we've had you on for an hour now, I think, and I think we've gotten a load of questions out of you. Before we try our best to recruit you to come and visit us in Ireland, is there anything you would like to do or see in Ireland that you haven't seen, or where do you have you been to Ireland many times, or is it something?
Personally, me, never. So I'd
You
love
never
to go
have.
someday. No.
We're revoking your well-traveled status until you get to Ireland.
Obviously, I need to see all the locations from Taffin.
Yes.
Brosnan's greatest film.
Ireland's greatest film. I mean, that's,
Ireland, yeah. I mean, the only film where I've seen him yelling. I've never seen
Michael
him yell.
Michael has a wee sound clip of that.
Yeah, Michael. I feel an insert from Michael.
Yeah.
Ooh, that sounded rude. Let me rephrase. I feel an edit from Michael. That would make Roger Moore blush. But the Taffin clip is quite hilarious. All right, but
it's a great movie.
We've all been to towns like that, and I don't think I've ever seen anyone as glamorous as Alison Doody and Pierce Brosnan in them. But
I'm sure they're just around the corner. I'm sure they're just
around the
keep
corner.
going around.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic, and we did actually do our own location tour at the start of this year. Sean O'Hare mentioned that we took the trip to Navan. I used to actually live in Navan when I was a kid, and I discovered when I was there that I attended the same school for a brief period that Pierce had done when he was a wee boy, but it was called something different at the time, so that's why I didn't put them together until John Gagan, who was taking us around, pointed it out to me.
Wow.
And it's quite impressive. Unfortunately, I was out the day they taught how to be an incredibly successful movie star, but there you go. But yeah, it's nice to see. I mean, it's a small town. It's fairly well developed now, but I can imagine in the 1950s or 60s when he left, there was nothing there very much. It was not a particularly prosperous time for Ireland generally, and certainly not for rural towns like Navan. But it's thriving now, and it was really nice that John took us around. So. But there are plenty of other places to go and people to see, and you've got your Irish friends now who'd be more than happy to come and see you if you do ever come over. It's only a hop across the water,
It is.
So we'd love to see you.
It's just a question of when.
That's it.
It's just a question of when. So, Thomas, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. I would encourage everyone to check out your online presence. Where can we find you, and what would be the best way to start the people's journeys on Albion Never Dies or Fleming Never Dies?
Oh, sure. So there's a website, albionneverdies.com. And from that, you can find whether it's iTunes, Spotify, if you want to see highlighted, if you just want to go to the James Bond page, you can find everything from there. And there's links to the Instagram as well. So.
Super. And we'll drop the links in the show notes as well. All right. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And for everyone listening,
a real pleasure.
Thank you for joining us. And we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Perfect.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tom.
Bye. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Tom, yep. Good luck.